KIRO, Seattle.
This is COVID-19 Seattle. I'm Dave Ross.
And I'm Aaron Granillo. Governor Inslee tells us all to stay home for another month.
This order will now be in place through May 4th.
Coming up, why the governor hopes it's the last time he extends the order, plus a new record rise in unemployment.
Last week, 180,000 plus individuals in Washington applied for unemployment insurance.
Maybe a few weeks before they start seeing their full benefits. Also, Boeing's new plan to survive the economic downturn, a voluntary layoff program. Stay with us.
I am extending our state's Stay Home, Stay Healthy initiative for an additional month. This order will now be in place through May 4th.
He is trying to make it clear that we are not past the curve yet.
There are no new restrictions with this order, but he did say that he hopes this will be the last extension of his stay-home order, but he did make no promises.
We would hope that this would be the conclusion, but the virus has a say in this, and what it does is something we will be watching very, very closely every single day, and I will just say that we will have more assurance that that would be the end, the more commitment we have to this order.
The latest models are showing that the state is going to hit the peak on April 11th, and projections are indicating that we'll have more than 1,000 deaths in this state. But the good news is that he showed a graph that indicates the state's growth rate of infection is slowing, so that we will have more time to prepare for the surge, more time to build up more hospital beds and get medical supplies.
Yeah, but he also showed this second chart, which he used the word concerning to describe it. And this details the percentage of tests that have come back positive, and it shows they are going up. And that's, of course, why he says more social distancing is needed.
We still, though, as far as I know, Aaron, haven't done an actual statistical sample with some of these new, more rapid tests to get a feel for exactly how much hidden virus is out there. And so I doubt that unless we did that, we would really have an accurate picture of how pervasive the virus still is.
Yeah, right. He was also asked tonight, there's still, because this order does go through May 4th, and technically his school closure order runs until, I believe the first day back would be the 27th of this month. So he was asked, if you're ordering your stay-home order through May 4th, does that mean schools are closed? He touched on that.
Does not reopen schools, although we certainly are having discussions about the next steps that our schools will take. And it is still important to reduce non-essential travel.
And of course, he says it is still okay to go outside, but he says, state parks are closed for a reason. He brought up the Skagit Valley Tulip Festival. He says that's closed for the same reason, because they, at the end of the day, they want to reduce big crowds.
He knows this is going to hurt the economy, but again, his priority is to stop the virus and says that has to come first.
He was also asked, because we are expecting so much lost revenue at the end of the day of all this, Governor actually said tomorrow he is planning to veto some certain bills, ones that he supports and ones that he wanted to sign off on. But at the end of the day, we're not going to have the money because we have so much lost revenue.
And some of the, I believe one of the programs vetoed was early childhood education, which I'm sure was painful because he's a big supporter of that.
Right.
But he also said the state can't print money. You have to be realistic. It's clear there's going to be a precipitous drop in state revenue, and so he had to prepare for that.
Well, the other big news today, a record number of Americans filed for unemployment. Nationwide, 6.6 million people.
Here in Washington State, more than 180,000 people filed claims last week. Nick Damaris is with the state's Employment Security Department.
That is a record 7 times that which we experienced during the height of the recession back in 2009. So we're seeing tremendous demand against the program right now.
The numbers bring the state's new jobless claims to roughly 350,000 since the beginning of March.
Now, Damaris says they are bringing on hundreds of new workers and expanding their call center hours to meet demands. I talked to a restaurant worker earlier today, though. He was laid off last month, filed for unemployment about 2 weeks ago, still hasn't seen any money.
I got a letter in the mail on the 19th that says unemployment claim determination. It says, we have determined that you will receive up to $219 a week. And I was probably making about $550 a week.
So he's getting less than half of what he used to make from the states. But as we know, he should be getting an extra $600 from the federal government as part of that big stimulus package. But here's the thing. This extra money from the federal government is going to take some time. I talked to the Employment Security Department today. The office says because it is so backlogged and its system is not up and running as it should quite yet, that federal money won't come until April 18th at the earliest for people who qualify for unemployment.
And that's the reason that they settled on that $600 payment for everybody, to make it simpler so that they could get the checks out on time. The unemployment systems around the country vary in their technology. Some of them are working on, as I understand it, really old computer systems that have not been updated. And so the idea of the $600 for everybody was to make it quicker. Apparently not quick enough for some people, but that's the way it's supposed to work. Unemployment is supposed to be about half your regular salary, right, and the $600 is supposed to bump it up or, in fact, exceed what you were making while you were employed. And
Dave, I should also mention, so even if you don't see that payment until the 18th, let's say you file for unemployment today, you should still see that $600 per week retroactively. So on the 18th, if you do get that money, it'll be closer to $1,800 because it'll be about 3 payments total that you should have received on top of your state's unemployment benefits.
Right. And in addition to payments to employees, the IRS is giving an incentive to businesses, big and small, to keep employees on in the form of a refundable tax credit of 50% of up to $10,000 in wages paid by an employer whose business has been impacted and who keeps the employees on. And this is available to all employers, regardless of size. Even if you're a tax-exempt organization, you get a tax. So essentially, the federal government pays half of the wages up to $5,000 in terms of the tax credit, $10,000 in wages because it's 50% of the wages, for what you pay to employees if you keep them on. And now we turn to the local economy. And to do that, we have Windermere Chief Economist Matthew Gardner. So give us your best prediction as a professional economist, given that this is not due to some fundamental problem with the banking system or the underlying economy, but is a temporary bug. Do we bounce back from this better than ever before, to quote the president?
I think we certainly could. Bottom line is we look at the U.S. as a whole, and how we look at growth, obviously, is GDP, kind of gross domestic product. Q2 is going to be horrendous. Myself and my colleagues are looking at a contraction, economic contraction, anywhere between 25 and 30% on an annualized basis in the second quarter. It's going to be horrible. Q3 will be modestly ugly, anywhere from a contraction of between 1 and 5%. But then I think, and we're all seeing, the potential for significant growth again in the fourth quarter. So what you said is absolutely right. This was not caused by a breakdown in the banking system, finance, corporate debt levels, trade wars. It was a bug. And so because of that, the economy, which was adding, by the way, 250,000 jobs a month, more than that, over the first 2 months of the year, was in good place. We hadn't really seen inflation. Wages were starting to rise. Employment was full. Unemployment was running at 3.5%. Worst comes to worst, in my opinion, is that the U.S. unemployment rate will peak out likely in July, somewhere around 12.5% to 13%. It's double digits again, but that will again be temporary. I think we'll probably see job losses of about 25 million employees, but again, temporarily. And that's what most economists believe.
So in other words, this will go down in history not so much as a recession, but just a long, unscheduled national vacation.
That is one way to look at it. However, technically, I would say we are, because we are going to see 2 negative quarters of growth. Technically, yes, we are going to have a recession. But yeah, you're right. Again, and I think ultimately, this pullback economically as we grow again, I think as much as many people, including myself, were trying to figure out when the next recession was going to happen. We were overdue because we've been expanding as a nation for, 10.5 years. This could be the reset, which means potentially we could actually go now out of this several years or additional years of growth.
The big announcement from Boeing this morning as it looks for ways to survive the coronavirus and the fallout from the MAX shutdown. Chris is here with that. Chris?
Yeah, some pretty important news this morning from Boeing CEO David Calhoun. He sent out a letter to all 160,000 global employees, including the 70,000 here in Washington, saying the company is starting a voluntary layoff plan. It is designed to trim the workforce and save the company cash as the company looks to weather the storm. We're in uncharted waters, Calhoun wrote in his letter. The program would allow eligible workers to walk away from the company with pay and benefits. What that package would look like or who would be eligible, they're still trying to hammer out. Calhoun wrote it would likely be 3 or 4 weeks before that information comes out. Now, a voluntary layoff plan also keeps Boeing on the positive side of a potential federal bailout, because the optics wouldn't be really good if the company were to accept billions in taxpayer dollars after involuntary layoffs. Of course, we still don't know if Boeing's going to take up the federal government on the bailout, considering some of the equity stake issues we've talked about before. Now, I want you to think about the global market right now for a minute that Boeing is dealing with. Bloomberg reporting nearly 44% of commercial airplanes around the world are sitting in storage right now because airlines aren't flying. And the company, which is already reeling from the MAX shutdown, many analysts that the twin aisle market could go down over the next couple of years. Some are predicting a 60% drop in the wide-body market over the next couple of years. So that's the Dreamliner and the yet-to-be-delivered 777X. As Calhoun wrote, quote, "It's important we start adjusting to our new reality now."
Okay, so layoffs. Does that mean you come back after a while, or does that mean you're separating from the company?
That it sounds like you're out. Basically, we've had these things before where you buy out workers at the tail end of the what you would consider their workforce life. People that have been there.
So this is retirement we're talking about.
You would think so. I mean, that's who they're targeting. That's who they're going to look at on the front end. So this is kind of a way to force some people out, maybe the higher salary people at the top end of the scale who've been there for decades. Kind of an attrition issue is what they're trying to do on the front end, hoping that they'll be able to stave off enough that they won't have to go the involuntary route. But they're calling it a voluntary layoff program. But it's basically a retirement walkout program.
What does that do for future competitiveness? I mean, you've got, are we talking about people who are designing the next generation? Is it going to be next generation?
Well, that's what we say. I mean, the wide-body market could take a 60% hit over the next couple of years. And, of course, they still haven't figured out the MAX either. So right now, and as we know, we're in the middle of the shutdown, they're not making anything right now. However, Calhoun did say in the letter that they are also still recruiting in many areas. I didn't expand on what those were, but this is a way, kind of a forced top-end retirement layoff to try to save some cash to keep them from having to do something a little bit more drastic. So we'll find out more over the coming weeks what this is really going to look like.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. We will be back tomorrow and every day after with a 10-minute rundown of the daily local news. You can subscribe to this podcast. You can also find our news coverage on mynorthwest.com or listen live at 97.3 FM.